Think Iran is just nuclear negotiations, carpet bazaars, and Persian poetry. Then how about a ritual that was still practiced in this country in the 1960s, one most people have never even heard described? Or a cave where, 7,000 years ago, people's skulls were opened while they were still alive and they survived. And at the end, a silent catastrophe awaits you, one that is swallowing entire neighborhoods of Iranian cities right now. Slowly, silently, without explosions or warnings. Today, 7 secrets of a country we don't actually know. The most incredible one comes last. Iran isn't just a country on a map. It's a historical layer cake, where every century left its mark on top of the one before. Temples were built on the ruins of other temples. Cities grew on the bones of earlier cities. New roads followed caravan routes that existed 3,000 years before our era. Dig into the ground in almost any Iranian city, and odds are you'll hit something thousands of years old. In Iran, the past doesn't sit behind glass in a museum. It's literally underfoot. It seeps through the walls. It rises out of the ground every time someone picks up a shovel. Behind the beautiful facade of turquoise domes and patterned carpets hide stories that send chills down your spine. Some are tied to ancient rituals, others to forgotten disasters, and others to places even locals are still afraid to enter. These aren't urban legends. They are real events, confirmed by historians, archaeologists, and eyewitnesses. 7 stories, 7 secrets. Each one reveals a completely unexpected side of a country we think we know. In reality, almost nothing. First stop, the outskirts of the Iranian city of Yazd. In the middle of a sun-scorched desert stand 2 low stone hills with flat tops. From a distance, they look like ordinary natural mounds, and a tourist unaware of their history would simply walk past. But climb the narrow stone path to the top and look inside, and you'll see a round platform paved with stone, with a shallow pit at the center. This is a dakma, a Zoroastrian burial structure. And what took place here for thousands of years is enough to make a modern person shudder. The Zoroastrians, followers of the world's oldest monotheistic religion, considered earth, water, and fire sacred elements that must never be defiled by dead flesh. Burial in the ground was unthinkable. Cremation was impossible, fire was sacred. Submersion in water was out of the question. There was only one option left: give the body to the birds. The deceased was carried to the top of the tower and laid on the stone platform. Men in the outer circle, women in the middle, children in the innermost circle, closest to the central pit. Then the vultures came. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of massive birds would descend on the tower, and within hours, strip the bones clean of flesh. After that, special attendants called nazellas would gather the remains and drop them into the central pit, where they crumbled to dust under the sun and wind. The most disturbing part isn't the ritual itself, it's the timeline. The towers of silence in Yazd were used for their intended purpose right up until the 1960s. People who are now 60 or 70 years old saw vultures circling these hills as children. Local elders recall that on the days of funerals, a distinctive smell hung over the city, one impossible to mistake for anything else. The Iranian government officially banned the practice in 1970, but some researchers claim that in remote Zoroastrian communities, it continued for several more years after the ban. Secretly, at night, to avoid drawing the attention of authorities. The archives of Yazd's Zoroastrian community still hold records from the nazellas. It was a hereditary profession, passed down from father to son. They were treated with respect, but also with unease. Under the rules of ritual purity, they couldn't touch ordinary people without undergoing special purification. The last nazella, whose memories were recorded in the 1980s, said, "Winter was the worst. The vultures came reluctantly, and the bodies stiffened on the stone. A process that took a few hours in summer could stretch into a full day in winter. He would stand on the tower all night in a sheepskin coat, listening to the wind howl, talking to the dead simply because there was no one else to talk to. There's also an aspect the guidebooks don't mention. As Iran's vulture population began to decline due to urbanization and pesticides, the ritual ran into a practical problem: there weren't enough birds. The smell from the towers spread to nearby neighborhoods. Yazd's residents began complaining, and this became one of the reasons authorities eventually banned the practice. Today, the Tower of Silence is a tourist attraction. You can climb to the top, stand on that very platform, and look down into the pit. The pit is empty, the remains long removed. But when the wind moves between the stones and a lone bird circles overhead, the imagination starts working on its own. Now for something completely different. In the mountains of Khorasan province, among empty ravines, stand the ruins of a village abandoned several decades ago. Mud brick houses, collapsed roofs, empty doorways with the remains of wooden beams hanging down. Nothing unusual for rural Iran, except for one detail. People from the surrounding villages flatly refused to go near the ruins after sunset. According to legend, the village was cursed centuries ago, after its residents killed a wandering dervish who had asked for water and shelter. Dying, he said, the earth will no longer give a harvest. The water in the wells will turn bitter. And at night, among the houses, the shadows of those not yet born, but already doomed, will wander. Of course, this is a legend. But the village really was abandoned, and the reasons aren't fully understood. Some researchers suggest a geological fault runs beneath the settlement, releasing sulfurous gases. At certain concentrations, these gases can cause headaches, hallucinations, and unexplained fear. If the wind shifts and the gases collect in enclosed spaces, the effect multiplies. People start seeing and hearing things that aren't there, and explain it the only way they know how: a curse. Iranian mythology populates such places with jinn, powerful spirits made of smokeless fire, capable of taking any form. They are said to live in ruins, caves, abandoned wells. Iranians believe that before entering an abandoned building, you should say Bismillah, in the name of God, to warn the spirits of your presence. This belief is so deeply rooted that even educated city dwellers, who use smartphones and read scientific journals, subconsciously avoid abandoned places after dark. The line between the rational and the irrational is far blurrier in Iran than in Europe. And that's not a sign of backwardness. It's the result of living on land that behaves unpredictably all on its own. There is an official explanation involving gas faults. Whether you believe it is up to you. The next mystery takes us literally underground. In 2006, a group of Iranian cave explorers investigating caverns in South Khorasan province discovered something that took their breath away. Beyond a narrow passage that a person could barely squeeze through, a massive chamber opened up. The walls were covered with thousands of drawings, figures of people, animals, strange beings with human bodies and bulls' heads, all done in ochre and charcoal thousands of years ago. But the artwork wasn't the most frightening part. Deep inside the cave, in a separate chamber, researchers found dozens of human skulls neatly arranged along the walls. Some had distinctive holes that anthropologists identified as trepanation marks. Trepanation is a surgical procedure in which a hole is drilled into the skull, one of the oldest surgical procedures in human history. The skulls are between 5,000 and 7,000 years old, making them some of the oldest evidence of trepanation in the entire Middle East. But there's something even more striking. Some of the skulls showed signs of bone healing around the holes. The patients survived the operation. Ancient surgeons in what is now Iran knew how to open the skull without anesthesia, without sterile instruments, and still keep the patient alive, 7,000 years ago. But not all the skulls belonged to people who were alive when the holes were made. Some had holes drilled after death. Why drill a hole in a dead person's skull? Some anthropologists believe the hole was meant to release the spirit, letting it freely leave the body. Others point to the arrangement of the skulls, facing the center of the chamber, forming a circle, and see this as an underground temple of the dead. Still others propose a harsher theory: a trophy storage room, a Stone Age war museum. But then why are there women's and children's skulls among the finds? The cave has been sealed off, and access is restricted. A full excavation is still ahead. For now, the question remains open: what exactly happened in this chamber, where daylight never reaches? And who did it? The fourth secret is one of the darkest pages of Iranian history, one that, even within Iran, people prefer not to discuss out loud. Hamadan is one of the oldest cities in the world, the former capital of the Median Kingdom. It sits on a high plateau surrounded by mountains, mountain air, abundant water, fertile soil, an ideal place to live. But that very position, at the crossroads of trade routes between East and West, turned the city into a perfect incubator for epidemics. Silk Road caravans brought Hamadan not just silk and spices, they brought fleas infected with the plague bacterium. When plague arrived, it devastated the city. Medieval chronicles describe streets littered with bodies that no one was left to bury. Houses where an entire family died in a single night. The Arab historian Ibn al-Athi described how, during one outbreak, the city's dogs went feral and began attacking the living, having grown used to feeding on corpses. When there were too many dead for ordinary cemeteries, authorities ordered mass graves to be dug outside the city walls. Dozens, by some estimates, hundreds, of such pits were dug around Hamadan over the centuries. Bodies were piled in layers, covered with lime, and buried under earth. Over time, the exact locations of these graves were forgotten. The city grew, and new neighborhoods were built directly on top of the plague pits. When Hamadan began installing water and sewer systems in the 20th century, workers repeatedly hit layers of bones, sometimes at a depth of just 1.5 meters to 2 meters. Some of these discoveries were so massive that construction had to stop for weeks. Historians estimate that plague epidemics killed between 30 and 60% of the population in affected cities. Hamadan endured such catastrophes repeatedly, and each time it was repopulated by people from surrounding villages, who had no idea they were building their homes on the bones of the previous generation. The city still stands on those bones today. Beneath its streets, parks, and residential blocks lie thousands of nameless victims, with not a single monument to mark them. This is a secret Hamadan carries in silence, like someone who knows they are sick, but would rather not talk about it. The fifth secret leads literally underground. In 2004, a resident of the small town of Nushabad, in Isfahan province, was digging a well in his yard. The water had turned cloudy, and he needed to dig deeper. His name was Hossein. When the ground suddenly gave way beneath his feet, and he fell into darkness, the first thing he felt was the freezing cold of underground air. He had no flashlight. Absolute silence, except for dripping water. He had no idea where he was. When his neighbors pulled him out and went down with flashlights, they found a tunnel stretching into total darkness. The local mullah forbade anyone from entering, declaring it the dwelling place of jinn. Months passed before archaeologists learned about the discovery. The underground city of Nushabad is a 3-level labyrinth of tunnels, rooms, ventilation shafts, and traps, carved into soft limestone at depths ranging from 4 to 18 meters. Historians date the complex to the Sassanid Empire, roughly the 2nd to 7th centuries AD. There are living quarters with niches for oil lamps, storage rooms, wells, and even a sewage system. The tunnels were deliberately made low and narrow, you can only move through them crouched or on all fours. This isn't a flaw, it's a defense mechanism. An enemy couldn't use weapons effectively and became an easy target. In several spots the tunnel split in two. One path led deeper into the city, the other ended in a dead end where the floor dropped away into a vertical shaft several meters deep. In the dark, without a light, an intruder would inevitably choose the wrong path and fall. Narrow slits were also cut into the walls, through which defenders could strike with spears while remaining unseen. Among the artifacts found in one of the chambers was a child's sandal, small, worn, made of roughly tanned leather. It could be a few hundred years old, or possibly more than 1,000. Precise dating hasn't been done yet. But that sandal is the most telling object found in the entire underground city. It says, "There were children here. Children whose parents dragged them into the darkness to save them from the slaughter above. Children who spent days or weeks in these tunnels in absolute darkness, listening to enemy horses' hooves pounding overhead. One small sandal, and behind it stands an entire world of horror that words can't fully capture." The sixth secret is the most inexplicable. In Chahamahal and Bakhtiari province, in the heart of the Zagros mountain range, there's a place locals call the Valley of the Jinn. A narrow gorge between sheer cliffs several hundred meters high, with a small river running along its floor. By day, an ordinary mountain landscape. After dark, everything changes. Residents of nearby villages say that at night, sounds come from the gorge that defy explanation. Not the howl of wind, not the sound of water. Something between a low rumble and a rhythmic tapping that grows and fades, as if someone deep within the rocks were methodically striking stone with a hammer. Sometimes it's joined by a sound resembling a monotone chant, on a single note, without words. Local shepherds refuse to drive their flocks into the gorge after sunset. The animals grow nervous and begin backing away long before the sounds become audible to human ears. There are rational explanations. Geologists point to underground cavities in the Zagros rock. Temperature swings cause the rock to expand and contract, producing the tapping. Underground water flows through narrow channels create a resonant hum. Wind passing through cracks in the rock, singing rocks, a phenomenon documented by geologists around the world. But a few years ago, a group of Iranian researchers set up recording equipment in the gorge and spent several nights there. They captured the sounds, but they found something else too. On certain nights, under certain conditions, the air temperature in the gorge suddenly dropped by 8 to 10 degrees within just a few minutes. This drop didn't correlate with air mass movement, cloud cover, or any other meteorological factor. It simply happened. After a while, the temperature would just as suddenly return to normal. The researchers openly admitted they couldn't explain it. The Valley of the Jinn keeps it secret, and locals still avoid it once the sun sets. There's no answer. But there are new questions, and so far, no one is in a hurry to ask them. And finally, the seventh secret, the largest in scale and perhaps the most alarming of all. It doesn't concern a single place, but an entire phenomenon unfolding right now, one that almost no one in the world knows about. Iran is slowly sinking. No, this isn't a metaphor. The country is literally collapsing into the ground. Over the past 2 decades, satellite observations have recorded catastrophic ground subsidence. In some areas, the land surface is dropping by 25 to 30 centimeters per year. Over 10 years, certain areas have sunk by 2 to 3 meters. Cracks hundreds of meters long are slicing through fields and roads. Buildings are tilting, foundations are tearing apart. In Isfahan province, there have been cases where residential homes had to be evacuated on an emergency basis, sinking into the ground before people's eyes. In 2017, a crack more than a kilometer long opened up in the southern suburbs of Tehran, cutting straight through a residential neighborhood. Walls split apart, foundations shifted, and several buildings were declared unsafe. Residents were evacuated, but there was nowhere to relocate them. People moved back into their cracked homes, patched the gaps with cement, and kept living there, because there's no alternative. The cause: catastrophic depletion of groundwater. Iran is arid, and for decades its water needs have been met by drilling wells. By various estimates, the country has more than 700,000 legal and illegal wells, pumping out water faster than it can be replenished. As the aquifer empties, the ground above it loses support and begins to sink, slowly, almost imperceptibly, just a few centimeters a year. But it's exactly that, almost imperceptibly, that makes what's happening so genuinely unsettling. No explosion, no single moment of catastrophe. The ground simply sinks, quietly, downward. Day after day, year after year. And no sirens. Even if every well were shut down tomorrow, the ground would never rise back up. The aquifer structure, formed over millions of years, has been destroyed permanently. This isn't a wound that can heal. It's an amputation. The scale of the problem goes far beyond cracked foundations. Monuments that have stood for thousands of years are at risk. Persepolis, built under Darius I in the 5th century BC, sits on a plateau where slow ground movement has been recorded. Isfahan's mosques, with their turquoise domes, rest on foundations never designed to handle these kinds of stresses. Cracks in the ground are cutting through railway lines, deforming gas pipelines, and rupturing pipes. And all of this is happening right now, as we speak. Iranian scientists call what's happening a silent catastrophe. Silent, because there's no single 0 hour, no day that will end up in textbooks. There's only slow, daily, soundless destruction, like rust eating away metal from the inside while everything looks fine on the surface. And when the metal finally snaps, everyone is shocked at how sudden it seems. Even though nothing about it was sudden at all. Researchers at the University of Tehran have created a subsidence map, marking the highest risk zones in red. It's a frightening sight. Red zones cover enormous areas around Tehran, Isfahan, and Mashhad. In effect, most of urban Iran lies within the danger zone. And the problem is getting worse every year. The population keeps growing, new wells keep being drilled, and groundwater levels keep falling. Experts warn that if nothing changes, a significant portion of the country's territory could become uninhabitable within 20 to 30 years. This isn't alarmism, it's the result of satellite data analysis. The ground beneath Iran is slowly, silently, and irreversibly sinking into the void. Stop for a second. Look at what we've just seen. Towers where the dead were given to the birds for thousands of years. A cursed village sitting atop a gas fault. A cave with skulls 7,000 years old. A city standing on the mass graves of plague victims. An underground labyrinth where children hid from a massacre above. A gorge where the temperature drops by 10 degrees for no apparent reason. And ground that is, right now, slowly swallowing itself. What do all these stories have in common? They're all about what's hidden beneath the surface, beneath the ground, beneath the outward sense of normalcy, beneath the beautiful facade. Iran is a country where the most disturbing things always lie just a little deeper than you're willing to dig. And you know what's most striking of all? Iranians know this. They grew up with these stories. They live with them every day, and yet they don't break. They brew tea, lay out carpets, read the poetry of Hafez, and keep on living on a land that holds more secrets than any other place on the planet. When your house sits above a plague burial ground, when a 1,000-year-old tunnel runs beneath your yard, when the mountains behind your village make inexplicable sounds at night, you either lose your mind, or you learn to accept it as part of life. Iranians chose the latter. Tell us in the comments, which of the 7 secrets struck you the most. If you found this interesting, hit like, it's the best way to say thanks. And subscribe, so you don't miss the next deep dive into places you won't find in textbooks. There are plenty more stories like this still to come.